This is 19.2 OAA activities. Bouldering is a form of rock climbing that is performed without the use of ropes or harnesses. So there's a few risks that need to be assessed before doing any of these activities. So one of the hazards is falling onto the floor due to your grip slipping. So the people at risk will be the climbers, but it will also be the people below. The controls put in place are that there's safety mats on the base that are quite thick, so if you do fall off, it's nice and padded. No one standing below the mat where you're climbing, and chalk on hands will give you extra grip. So the risk rating for this is 6. There's also mat checks, signs up, boulders will also be tightened regularly, so this might be once a day they tighten them. Another hazard is the boulder not tight and causing injury. So this would be the climbers and the people below that are at risk. So the controls they put in place are checking the boulders before climbing and having mats below. However, this only has a risk rating of 3. For this hazard, they'd have a rotor for people to check the boulders. The next hazard is that clothing is too loose and it can get caught on the rock. So the people at risk would be the climber. The controls in place would be to tell people what clothing to wear and advise them what to wear, and you'd have checks before to make sure that your clothing is right and suitable. The risk rating for this is 1, so it's not very likely it will happen, but if it did, it would not cause that much harm. Other comments are that there'll be signs up with pictures of the correct clothing to be worn and the incorrect clothing to be worn. The next hazard is not wearing proper footwear, so it could cause your foot to slip because it doesn't have enough grip, and this could cause injury to the individual, so people at risk would be the climber. The controls in place would be telling people what to wear, but also there is footwear provided for the climbers that will give them extra grip rather than their normal trainers. The risk rating for this is 4, and there will be posters up that has the correct footwear to wear and what not to wear. Finally, the last hazard would be climbers colliding with other climbers. So the people at risk would only be the participants taking place. Controls in place, only one person climbs at one time, and also you'll have observers making sure you're not going to collide with each other. The risk rating for this is 2. Don't know why it says 4, but it's 2. Other comments is making sure that everyone sticks to the rules. So making sure that they don't all climb together, making sure that they listen to everyone as well. So for bouldering, your personal protection equipment are shoes. These are special climbing shoes, and these are for your grip. Also tight clothing to prevent it getting caught and stuck on a rock and causing injury. Chalk with chalk bags will maintain the grip, and obviously the chalk bag will carry the chalk in it, and a hairband to keep your hair out of your face so you can see where you're going. Emergency procedure for an OAA activity. So if there was a crisis when you're out bouldering, emergency procedures would need to be taken into place. So if there were a group of you, one person would stay with the casualty and the other 2 would go find help, as you wouldn't leave the individual themselves. However, if there are only 2 people, you would firstly need to check the danger to make sure that you wouldn't be putting yourself in any danger. You also need to ensure that the individual stays warm. So this can be done by lighting a fire or wrapping them in more clothing. The principles of Dr. ABC would be applied, which would be obviously your first aid. This is the basic way of keeping someone calm and in a steady state. Also, you may want to call for help. However, if you're in the middle of nowhere, then an emergency signal would be more beneficial. So, for example, the flashlight on a phone, and keep repeating it every minute until someone comes to the rescue. If you're up in the mountains, it's important to look out for the weather because it can change dramatically over a couple of minutes. So if the individual can walk, you may not want to move them if the weather's getting really bad, because then you could get lost on the mountain and then it'll be worse. There are some environmental considerations when bouldering. So one of them is that it ruins the growth of vegetation on the side of the rock. So obviously if people are constantly climbing up the rock, then vegetation won't grow up that rock. It can also affect animals that are nesting in the rock. So if you're putting your holes and little crevices and little gaps in the rocks, birds may be nesting in there and it may be disrupting their breeding. And also erosion of the rock face, because if everyone's using the same path, over time the rock's going to wear away. So the cautions that are put in place is that it's now mainly indoor climbing. So you don't have the problem of eroding a rock face and ruining the growth of vegetation or affecting the animals. But also, if you are climbing outside, there will be set places to climb. So these may be moved around every couple of weeks to stop erosion, but then again, it may be used on a rock that there's minimal vegetation and there's no animals nesting in it. So the risks that weren't accounted for in the previous risk assessment, one of the hazards is hitting your head on the rock's face that's like sticking out. So the people at risk would be the climber. The controls in place would be letting them know that the rock face sticks out. The risk rating for this is 6. It's quite high because if it were to happen, then it could cause a lot of harm to the individual. Also, you have people on the ground advising them where to go and what bit sticks out, and also having yellow tape on the part of the rock that sticks out so you can see it visibly. The next hazard is pulling a muscle from overstretching. People at risk are climbers. The controls in place, getting climbers to warm up beforehand, and you'll have specific areas for this warm up, and also colour for difficulty levels. So you'd have grey for hard, and then you'd have black and yellow for not so hard. OA activity is skiing. So skiing is a mode of transport and it's a recreational activity and a competitive winter sport in which participants use skis to glide on snow. So there's a risk assessment for skiing. One of the hazards is falling over and injuring yourself, so the participant will be at risk. Controls in place, there's not much to reduce this risk factor, but there'll be a safety talk before you start skiing. The risk rating is 4, and there'll be signs up to show you what to do and what not to do and techniques. And also slopes are marked with the different colours for difficulty levels. Another hazard is individuals could fall off the ski lift, so this cause injury to participant and the people below. The participant will be instructed how to use the ski lift safely, but also young individuals will supervise while they use the ski lift. So this has quite a high risk rating of 6. There'll be signs on how to use the ski lift and when to get on, and people will be helping you when you're there, and ensuring that young individuals are supervised. Another hazard is getting lost off-piste and piste skiing. So this will cause harm to the participants. Controls in place, so a procedure is in place for if people go missing. So like a meeting point is identified before you start skiing. Off-piste skiing is not allowed and young people are not allowed to ski alone. And the participants have a piste map so they know where they're going. It has once again quite a high risk rating of 6. There's signs up around the ski slopes with maps of where you are and where you want to be, and people are advised not to ski off piste. Another hazard is hypothermia and falling through to losing balance due to the lack of free movement due to incorrect clothing. So hypothermia can be linked to incorrect clothing because if you're not wearing enough then you'll get too cold. The participants will be at risk. So clothing that is hired is well fitted for the user and insulated. Also sunglasses and goggles are worn while skiing. This isn't a very high risk rating, it's only 2. There'll also be posted up with correct things to wear and what not to wear. Another hazard is skiers colliding with other individuals, so people at risk are the individuals. The controls in place are verbal warnings to watch out for others on the slope and observers around. The risk rating for this is 4, and individuals make sure that everyone sticks to the rules, and there'll be people around to advise this. So personal protection equipment for skiing would be ski boots, goggles, helmet, ski poles, skis, suitable clothing, so this would be insulated, tight, waterproof, a piste map, and a phone. So the emergency procedures for an OA activity. So for example, if you were skiing and someone in your group skied off the edge of the mountain and really hurt themselves. So it's firstly very important to check for danger, because if they cause an avalanche, then personal safety will come first. Also, Dr. ABC applies, so this is first aid. You complete the first aid on them because you can keep them calm and give them basic first aid before help comes. Also, keeping them warm is very important because if they're on the slopes, then temperatures can be as low as -15. So it's important to keep the individual warm, otherwise they could get hypothermia, and this is probably a bigger problem. Also checking weather, because weather on the slopes can change in a matter of minutes, so it's important that you keep an eye out for what's going on and what the weather is doing, because if you're in a sheltered area, it may be best to stay there, if a blizzard's about to come. Once again, shelter is there to keep them warm, and emergency signals. So if no help's coming, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, and the individual's unable to move, you can use your phone or your torch on your phone, or maybe starting a fire. Some environmental considerations. So erosion of vegetation caused by large numbers of visitors to the slopes. Because skiing is a very popular sport, there's a lot of people in the area half the year, which causes a lot of noise pollution. So this could affect animals and their breeding habits. And also, avalanches are caused by off-piste skiing. So it can cause snow shifts from one area to another. This can also harm and kill a lot of animals depending on the size of the avalanche. So controls put in place are parts are fenced off to allow vegetation to grow, and planned avalanches mean that it's less likely to happen out of the blue, so therefore it can help reduce animals getting caught up in them. So there are some risks that weren't accounted for in the first risk assessment. So hazards, faulty equipment could cause cuts, bruises, and it could cause broken bones. The risks to participant, the controls in place is only equipment that is suitable and that has been checked for safety is used. Trip has been arranged through a company who's recognised suppliers of equipment, and the risk rating of 6, so if it did happen, it would be quite dangerous. Other than telling them what to do, there's pictures of correct, suitable equipment. Another hazard is weather and extreme temperatures causing hypothermia, frostbite, or it could cause dehydration or sunstroke. So this would be to the participant. So appropriate clothing is worn at all times. Weather and snow forecasts are obtained and considered each day. The risk rating of this again is very high. So you're having specific clothes to be worn, so if it's very cold you need insulated clothes. Then also if it's very hot you can get dehydration and you don't know about it, so water stations will be provided on the slopes quite regularly. The next OAA activity I'm going to talk about is sailing. So one of the hazards is drowning from capsize or falling overboard. The people at risk are the sailors. The controls in place so that sailors are ensured that their personal buoyancy is worn at all times, and also that it's fitted. And people will have mobile phones on them and available to contact the emergency services if something were to go wrong. The risk rating is 6, which is quite high. First aid and CPR to be administered as necessary. Hazard, injury through collision with other watercraft, so people at risk are the sailors and the other people they've sailed into. The rules of the sailing will be obeyed by all sailors and they are known by all sailors. Risk rating is at 3. And when you're out on the big sailing, crews ensure that they're competent to take avoiding action and do not present a hazard to other people. Injury through being struck by the boom. This is to sailors and inexperienced sailors or those who have medical conditions to wear head protection, and individuals must have lessons if they've never been sailing. So this has a risk rating of 6. So protective headwear provided and lessons are also provided. Injury from equipment on boat or slipping on the surfaces. So the sailors are at risk. They decide if conditions are suitable for sailing and water close to sailors if weather is bad. So there will be signs up to say the week's weather forecast and whether they can or can't sail. The next hazard is capsizing, so the sailors would be at risk. So if the boat was to turn over, then they'd be stuck underneath it. So controls in place is that when people go out, they're suitably equipped and there should be help on hand all the time. Risk rating is 3, and there'll be advice from teachers, there'll be observers, and there'll be help nearby.